Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Stephen Vantassel here, wildlife control consultant, giving you another episode of Living the Wildlife. Wanted to talk today about trapping armadillos. Yeah, they're kind of a cool creature. I wish I had trapped one. I have not yet. I was too far north in most of the times in my life, but I'm hoping to get one eventually. I was hoping to get one in Nebraska because we have them in Nebraska, but unfortunately I didn't during my time there, and we don't have them in Montana. So maybe I'll have to wait a while and get down south and do some armadillo trapping. So let's talk about armadillos. Scientific name, of course, is Dasypus novemcinctus. Yeah, say that 10 times in a row. That's going to be a little difficult, but it's the 9-banded armadillos we're talking about here. And there has always been this debate about what is the best bait to lure armadillos, because armadillos can really trash someone's yard. And of course, a lot of people out there, I call them lawn Nazis. Yes, it's not very respectful, but some people are just a little too enamored with their grass. But nevertheless, their property, they can do that. So clearly they don't like armadillos coming in and trashing their grass, and so they want the armadillos to be removed. So how do you do it? Well, if you talk to various individuals, they will tell you that this particular bait, they'll use worms or grubs, or they say they have some sort of magic bait. Well, it's interesting that one of the challenges we have in this industry is getting good data that is rigorously tested to see what is actually true experimentally wise versus just anecdotal. Now, anecdotals, sometimes that's all we have. We just have someone's opinion, and that can be valuable depending on the level of experience and the carefulness of someone talking about their data. So we have what's called in research the bias of what's recency bias, which means that we often tend to put extra weight intellectually on what's happened to us the most recently, because that's what we remember. And we forget about all the things that occurred before that skew the data that happened the most recently. Let me give you an illustration. I've done some research on pocket gopher trapping. And when I was just trying to mentally think of which method of trapping pocket gophers was the best, I had an idea. And when we crunched the data, it turned out that it was not statistically significant. In other words, the numbers were so close in terms of the options that my belief of what I thought was a quote-unquote better method didn't really matter. So there you go. That's what happens when you have the problem of recency bias, where what occurred most recently is you think has the most weight. And we do this subconsciously. It's not like we're deliberately trying to deceive people per se. It's just one of the problems that we're wired, because our memories obviously decay over time. Well, getting to the issue of trapping armadillos, I came across a publication by, let me give you the authors' names here, Daniel J. Gammons, that's Gammons, Michael T. Mengak, Mengak, and L. Mike Conner, Conner, and they wrote a publication, part of the wildlife management publication series, part of the school of Forestry and Natural Resources out of the University of Georgia. That's known as the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Georgia. And they published this little document. It's not a peer-reviewed publication, but it is a university publication, sort of like the ones that I wrote when I was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We called them NEB guides. These are Nebraska guides. And they would go through internal review in terms of the university, but it wasn't a full-on scientific review. But my point is that even though it wasn't published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, this was rigorously done, so that you can put some confidence in this. So anyways, they published this particular document in March of 2005, and what they did is they were trying to figure out what is the best bait to trap armadillos. And the reason they wanted to look into this is because their extension agents, extension is a part of the university, these usually land-grant universities, where they take scientific information and package it for the public, and they try to take the research side of the university and apply it to the public. So it's that application element that's where extension agents. So these are individuals that try to bridge the gap between the academic world and the real life world, and bringing knowledge to practical effect. Kind of like what we do here at Pest Geek, right? We're not necessarily scientists in the sense that we don't have a lab and we're out there doing all this high-end research. We're basically engaging the research done by scientists and wildlife biologists or an entomologist, and then we're trying to translate that information into something you as the technician, as the PCO, as the wildlife control operator, as the business owner, how can you take this information and apply it to your business to improve the work for your customer, for yourself, and just be better at what you do, and hopefully make more money and do it faster so you can have some time off and enjoy yourself. And so rather than making you guys, sorry, there are very few women in this world, but if you're a lady, welcome. Glad to have you. But we want to be sure we take that information. Someone has to read all that and pack it, distill it down. Now, you can certainly read this on your own, but what we're doing is we're saving you some time so you can go out there and make more money. So they published this document, which is what extension individuals do. And the reason this was the motivation behind this was because they found when they did a survey of their extension agents in Georgia that over 3/4 of their extension agents reported receiving complaints or requests for information on the control of armadillos. And so what they also found was, out of all the inquiries made of extension agents in Georgia, 10% were on armadillos. It had even surpassed the number of requests they had on deer. So in Georgia, so if you're living in Georgia, armadillos are clearly a problem. Probably would be similar to what we had in the Northeast, where people were complaining about squirrels all the time. So it seems like armadillos are the squirrel of Georgia, right? So there is a big problem. So because of that perceived need in the community of Georgia, these researchers said, look, we need to figure out what is the best way to control this if we're trapping. And so that's what they did. They did some research and found out. So let me give you a little background about what they were doing. So this is what they did. They were testing various baits and lures. And so here's the list of baits that they were testing. Live night crawlers, rotten chicken feed, rotten eggs, marshmallows, vanilla wafers, armor plate, which was a commercially available lure. Obviously, its name was armor plate. Live crickets, whole eggs, bananas, sardines, moistened soil. So those were the baits and lures that they were testing, that they'd listed here. And so this is what they did, was they used tomahawk wire cage traps. These, and the size of the traps were 10 by 12 by 32. So a raccoon size tomahawk wire cage trap. And they were trapping from April to July in 2004 at an ecological research center in Georgia. They placed the traps in areas where there was lots of armadillo sign. And so what they did was they tested those types of baits, as well as they tested 2 types of unbaited sets. So they tried to do some multiple testing here. They weren't just testing the baits that I listed earlier, but they were also testing traps, unbaited traps with wings and unbaited traps without wings. Now, wings were 2-inch by 6-inch boards that were 6 feet long, attached to the open end of the trap to help funnel the armadillos into the cage. Okay, so get the picture here. They're testing not only baits, but they're testing unbaited sets. Some of the unbaited traps had wings. Some of the unbaited traps were without wings. And they're trying to do a statistical analysis to find out which one was more effective. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean by a trap night. A trap night is the placement of a trap that is, once you set the trap stays overnight. That is one trap night. So if you have 5 traps out there and those 5 traps stay overnight, that is 5 trap nights. Okay, so bear with me here. So what they did was their study had a total of 1,332 trap nights. Out of those 1,332 trap nights, they only captured 10 armadillos during this entire study of 1,300 trap nights. That is about 1 armadillo for every 132 trap nights. So let me unpack that a little bit. So if they had 132 traps out there and they stayed overnight, that would be 132 trap nights, and they would have only have caught 1 armadillo. So clearly they were trapping longer. They weren't using 132 traps, obviously. But if they were using, let's say, 10 traps or 20 traps, you can see how many nights they would need to be trapping to get 132 trap nights, or 1,332 trap nights. Okay? So of the 11 attractants that they used, most of them, and they list them here, so they tested 11 of the baits. Most of them, and here they list them here, so these are the ones that got 0 captures. So bear with me here. So they tested 11 baits. Of those 11 baits, the following baits had 0 captures. Those were night crawlers, chicken feed, whole eggs, bananas, marshmallows, sardines, and vanilla wafers. So those baits had 0 captures. Let me repeat that again for you. Night crawlers, chicken feed, whole eggs, bananas, marshmallows, sardines, and vanilla wafers. All of those baits had 0 captures during their study. The remaining 4 attractants, the capture rate was so low it didn't have statistical significance. So this is the problem, and here they are. And let me give you those 4 baits that had captures. Crickets had 94 trap nights, and they captured 1 armadillo. Rotten eggs had 52 trap nights, captured 1 armadillo. Moistened soil had 44 trap nights with 1 capture of an armadillo. Armor plate lure had 102 trap nights. It captured 1 armadillo. Of the other 7 attractants, there were 140 trap nights used for those other, they totaled up all those other attractants, 7 attractants. There were 0 captures of armadillos. So what's the bottom line there? Of those 11 attractants, essentially speaking, none of them were statistically significant. In other words, you say, well, but they captured one. Yeah, but statistical significance is you have to always understand that there's an element of randomness whenever we're doing trapping, right? Sometimes just because you put a bait inside of a trap doesn't mean that the animal was truly attracted to it. Sometimes the animal just may be like, I just want to explore this cage. Or it was not paying attention and walked in. You may say, well, it's really weird. Yes, and I'm not saying it happens commonly, but mistakes and accidents happen, and you all know that in your own life. Sometimes, as I tell people, it's better to be lucky than good, right? So sometimes you have a capture and you're like, how did that happen? It was just sometimes the luck of the draw. And that's what they're saying here about these baits. There's no statistical significance to any of them. They say, well, some had captures. Yep. But it's so small, you can't overcome the issue of chance. If we do this test again, maybe one of the other baits that had 0 captures this time would have 1 capture the next time. Okay. So you can do some repetition on this, but clearly there's nothing to gain here. It's you're rolling the dice and you might get lucky. Now you may get depressed here. You say, well, what will work? Well, here's where things get interesting. What they found was traps that had wings did significantly better than traps without wings. Because remember, they caught 10 armadillos during their study. 4 of the armadillos were caught with bait. 6 armadillos were caught in traps without bait. Of those 6 armadillos, 4 were caught in unbaited traps with wings, but only 2 were caught in unbaited traps without wings. So what's the bottom line? You need to have wings on your trap. You want to catch armadillos. Put bait in the back if you feel like it, but the reality is you do far better putting raccoon-sized cage traps on the lawn, put the trap up against a fence, and then put some caging, some screening out to help funnel that armadillo into your trap. If you're using a 2-door trap, you can put wings on both sides and double your exposure. That's what you're going to have to use. Now, does that mean a bait maker out there or a wildlife control operator or a PCO won't be able to find that magic lure to be able to really pull these armadillos in? No, it's possible. But right now, the 11 products that were tested don't seem to be working. Okay. So sorry to discourage you. Maybe that might encourage one of you as a bait maker out there to get something done to do the work. But let me go through that list one more time for those of you who are bait makers. Okay. Finding out what is going to work for you. Maybe you want to try to avoid these particular products, but here they are. Live night crawlers, rotten chicken feed, rotten eggs, marshmallows, vanilla wafers, armor plate, which is a commercially available lure, live crickets, whole eggs, bananas, sardines, and moistened soil. Those were the 11 lures and baits that were tested. They said there's nothing statistical here. Now, is that the end all and be all? Maybe things are different in an urban environment than they are in a more natural area. Don't know. But if you want to find out for yourself, you have to do the work, which means you're putting an unbaited trap on someone's property along with a baited trap. And then you're recording the data. My experience is most wildlife control operators, most PCOs won't take the time to do that kind of work over time. And so their data tends to be a little more on that anecdotal thing, and they only remember what happened recently. So if you're going to be trapping armadillos, we do know adding wings to your traps work, and they will significantly improve the ability of yourself to capture those nuisance armadillos. Hope that was helpful for you. I'm Stephen Vantassel. Hey, would love to hear from you. wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.